Hello, and welcome to Inventors Helping Inventors. I'm your host, Alan Beckley, inventor of the Wonder Wallet. If you're an inventor searching for proven ways to make money with your invention, if you dream to see your product selling in stores everywhere, you've come to the right place. There's no better place to get help than from experts, inventors who've already achieved success. Every week, I interview successful inventors, asking them the questions you want to know. Tune in to learn from the experts so you can get your invention out of the tank and into the bank.
I grew up with an aunt who was a bit of an organized hoarder, and there was always a new box to uncover, new trinkets to examine. She was a big fan of antiques, which I think we can all agree have a certain character that modern products lack. And I believe that just as reading develops your vocabulary and makes you more articulate, being exposed to so many random objects, past inventions, did that for me as far as a mental toolbox on how to create things, mechanical structure of things, and just ideas in general. I found myself constantly making things, sewing things.
Did you ever notice it's kind of lonely being an inventor? If you're like most inventors, your family and friends may love you, but they think you're crazy, spending hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars, all to create a great product that may never get into the marketplace or make you any money, right? What if you could join an engaging community of inventors just like you, who are toiling away at their own inventions just like you? What if you could finally connect with resources that can help you? Patent attorneys, prototypers, Chinese manufacturers, resources you can trust at a cost you can afford. What if every month you could learn the keys to success from successful inventors who are making a living from their inventions? Wouldn't that be great? Guess what? All of that and more is available to you in our Inventors Helping Inventors membership group, going strong now for over 4 years. And for a limited time, I'm offering you access to the group and all its resources for just $1. Just go to alanbeckley.com/$1. That's the number 1 followed by DOLLAR. alanbeckley.com/$1. $1 gives you access for 30 days. After that, your investment to continue is only $35 each month. What's the catch? There is no catch. Stay in the group as long as you like. Leave anytime. Many of our members have been with us for over 3 years. So to join us now, go to alanbeckley.com/$1, and I'll see you in the membership group. Welcome to episode number 524. Today is a rebroadcast of one of our classic favorites, episode number 192, way back to April 25th of 2022 with inventor Tanya Jackson. Tanya invented a new product that works with a baby stroller, allowing a parent to easily jog with their baby in the stroller. It ensures smooth forward motion for the stroller, making it a good experience for both the parent and the toddler. Since her first episode, her utility patent has been issued. I think you're going to enjoy this episode as much as I did. Tanya Jackson grew up on 40 acres in northwest Indiana before moving to Chicago at age 16. She obtained a business marketing degree from DePaul University, but the corporate world did not suit her. So she ran a variety of business ventures, including a dog walking service and owning a bartending school. Her aha inventing idea came as she watched parents jogging with their toddlers. She felt there had to be a better way to make the journey enjoyable for both the parent and the toddler. She developed a product that millions of parents who like to go for a jog with their toddler would like to use. Make sure and listen to this entire interview because Tanya shares how she evaluated options of venturing her product or licensing it and how she finally decided to pursue licensing. You'll also learn how she methodically created a pitch deck to present to family and friends for funding for her business, and also how she uses a daily work journal to ensure she is on track and staying focused upon the tasks that are most important to her and moving her invention forward. Now let's get right to our interview with Tanya Jackson. Tanya Jackson, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast with us today.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine.
Thanks for being on. And I want to start with kind of an interesting question is that can you share with us something interesting about yourself that most people don't know?
Yeah. So I am a Mexican American who grew up in the country in Indiana, and I started playing the violin when I was 6, although I guess you would call it the fiddle. And I was in a bluegrass band for a few years. So not many people know that one.
Now that is an interesting combination. A Mexican American playing the violin, you don't always make those connections. And then being in a bluegrass band. So that's fascinating, actually.
It's a little different.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tanya, what did you do before you became an inventor? For example, where did you grow up and go to school? And what is your backstory?
Yeah. Like I said, although I was born in Chicago, I grew up in a small town in Northwest Indiana. I grew up an only child, which I think forces you to lean into your imagination. We lived on 40 acres, so plenty of outdoor exploring, although there was no shortage of exploring to do indoors. I grew up with an aunt who was a bit of an organized hoarder, and there was always a new box to uncover, new trinkets to examine. She was a big fan of antiques, which I think we can all agree have a certain character that modern products lack. And I believe that just as reading develops your vocabulary and makes you more articulate, being exposed to so many random objects, past inventions, did that for me as far as a mental toolbox on how to create things, mechanical structure of things, and just ideas in general. I found myself constantly making things, sewing things. Looking back, inventing has been a joy of mine for some time. But as far as work, I moved back to Chicago when I was 16, attended DePaul University for business marketing, but couldn't see myself in a corporate job. I worked for a period of time as a promotional model, and for some time was bartending as the source of income while I explored my entrepreneurial pursuits. I had a dog walking company, spent a year writing a book. I owned a bartending school for a few years until I realized that while making a living off of that, I wasn't going to get the wealth that I desired.
Well, that's an interesting story. And I've mentioned this a few times in the past about how Steve Jobs used to say that you look into your background and past and you can connect the dots. So, what sounds like unconnected different kinds of events actually come together to create the person you are now and actually come to reinforce your path going forward in a unique and creative way. And there's some interesting people, for example, Marie Forleo, when she was getting started, she's a phenomenally successful entrepreneur. She was doing bartending, amongst other things. And similarly, James Wedmore had a mobile bartending business in his beginning back in the day. And now he's got a $10 million a year online business. The other one I just like to mention is a fair number of people I've had on the podcast grew up in rural surroundings and found that was actually very good for inventing and creative thinking because on the farm, there's a lot of things that aren't just right at your reach. And sometimes you just have to create something to solve a problem. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just as far as like work experiences, there's certain skills out of each of those jobs that I find myself now applying and inventing and now pursuing a licensing agreement. I find a lot of those skills useful. And then even to go back to my childhood, yeah, just being exposed to machinery and the woods and nature, and also being an only child forces you to keep yourself entertained. There's a lot of using the imagination for sure.
Tanya, I want to share with our listeners that you're in an interesting stage of the inventive journey, and that is bringing your product to life through a true working prototype. You're working with Brian Keast, who's a designer and prototyper whom we've had on this podcast and who is a sponsor of ours as well. So I know Brian well. And so, can you describe for us what this part of the journey has been like for you so far?
In a word, fun. When you're figuring out everything on your own, it can feel like running through sand. Learning takes time, and wanting to see progress to stay motivated is natural. Working with a professional, someone who has experience and know-how can save you so much time. And that sense of quick forward movement is super exciting. Also, inventing, creating your own prototype is a very lonely process. So you're typically working alone and aside from perhaps a family member or a close friend or two to confide in. You don't have anyone to talk about this with. It's been a breath of fresh air to freely bounce ideas back and forth with Brian. I have the ideas, he has the know how to make it a reality. The collaboration has been a truly enjoyable process.
Thanks for sharing that. And it sounds like that has definitely been very helpful. I loved your expression. It's like running through sand. And you just speak about something that I think every inventor encounters, and that is a feeling of loneliness because so much of what we do on our own and by ourselves to a certain degree. And the other thing is, if we're in the corporate world or working 40 hours a week or whatever, we soon find the more we share with our colleagues, the more they look at you like a deer in the headlights, like, oh, okay, so you're going to file for a patent. It's going to cost you a few $1,000s. You don't know if you're going to get it. It's not any retail stores. You're not sure if you're going to get it in retail stores. And you're spending a bunch of money on this thing. And they're like, really? Why are you doing this? I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but I certainly did.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of people who question how you're going to do this, how are you going to do that? And in my head, I always respond, don't worry about how I'm going to do it. Where there's a will, there's a way. I'll figure it out. And a lot of people who don't see how you're going to do it, that's the reason why they haven't done it. But yes, you're correct. It's sometimes it's better to just keep ideas to yourself.
I reckon it to being like a horse in a race with the blinders on each side. So they can't look from one side to the other and just stay focused on going forward, as it were. But the other thing it said is critics never create anything of their own. So there's that as well.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about the main thing that our listeners are most interested in, and that is your product solves a problem that millions of parents who would like to go for a jog with their toddler encounter every week. Your product allows both the parent and the baby to fully enjoy and benefit from the journey. And I know at this point in your journey, you cannot divulge further details, but what led you to create a product like this? And what was your aha moment, if you could share that with us?
Yeah, I don't have children of my own, but it's just one of those things where I'm actually a runner. So in my runs, I would see this problem and it seemed so evident. And it was almost like, someone's going to come up with that. Someone's going to come up with that. And a few years later, no one still had came up with it. So I figured, why not go for it? But yeah, my aha moment, I think it was just that thought of there's got to be a better way. And then is there a true need? Is it something that has a big enough market? Can it be cost effectively manufactured? And this idea just passed all the tests.
That's fantastic. And your journeys and jogging, et cetera, it's so often said that necessity is the mother of invention. And as you said, you don't have children, so you haven't had the absolute necessity, but you could see it all around you and think, wow, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Absolutely.
So, Tanya, from my observation, you've been able to work almost seamlessly with Brian in developing your prototype. Brian has shared with me that working with clients, shall we say, is rarely as smooth as has been the case with you. Can you share with our listeners what are some of your best practices for converting an idea into workable design that a designer or prototyper can easily use? In other words, what are some of your tips and tricks in that area?
First of all, that's really lovely that he said that. This was my first go at this. And I think I always kept in mind what would make his job easier. How could we get to that end goal easiest? And I came to him with a proof of concept prototype already developed, which I think was key. And I had proven that the product worked. I kept all of my old prototype sketches and sent him what I thought could be useful or contender components so that it saved him a lot of time of, oh, just trying to imagine solutions. I had spent a year developing the prototype. I had ideas of what could work. And I think giving him a strong idea jumping off point saved us a good amount of time and also gave him more of a concise idea of what I was trying to achieve. Aside from that, I think it's important to understand that a developer doesn't know everything about your industry. Realistically speaking, as you were saying before about invention or necessity being the mother of all invention, you probably have personal experience in the field you're inventing that the developer doesn't. And giving him specs or parameters that are important to the invention is key. And also just pitching in what I could. Let's say that he was looking for a specific piece. Instead of having him spend a few hours on Amazon or McMaster looking for these parts, I would take it upon myself to scour the internet, save him that time so he could focus on the things that I couldn't do, as in designing and building the prototype, and we could just get to the end goal faster. And I think even something as simple as prompt responses can make things move along smoothly and also faster.
Several great tips you had that I'd like to highlight for our listeners. One of them is you put in a lot of due diligence, time, and effort before you ever came to him. As you mentioned, you had spent over a year developing your prototype. And I want to stress when you make a proof of concept prototype, you've you've taken what was something maybe on paper and then you started putting it into a real design. And it almost always changes when you do that. What looks like it's going to work perfectly on paper often changes a bit when you start putting the pieces together and say, oh, wow, that part won't move properly unless I give it more space or any number of things that comes up from developing a true prototype. But then also, I love that you said you think about how can you make his job easier? What can you give him or your prototype or designer to help it where they can do their job easier, which is going to serve both of you. And I think that's really good. And also the fact that you said you would look for where you can jump in and help. If there's something that's going to take some research and it's something you can do, it's not really quite aligned with his sweet spot, so to speak, his ideal expertise, then you can take that off his plate, do it for him, and then give that back to him.
Yeah. And the collaborative effort, it just makes you feel more involved in the end product and you just retain that excitement. You keep that excitement going.
Thanks for sharing that. Now, I want to go in a slightly different direction, but this is something every inventor encounters. And that is, what would you say has been your greatest setback or roadblock so far? And then what did you do to, overcome it and move forward? Many inventors are tempted to give up after hitting some roadblocks, but successful inventors recognize that your success is never defined by what happens to you, but rather by what you choose to do about it. So could you share with us a big roadblock that you've managed to overcome?
Yeah. I think my biggest roadblock truly was deciding whether to venture it myself or to license. And this came up when this was after I had created the proof of concept prototype. I wrote a provisional patent application myself, actually, and filed that, had a patent search performed. And then the next step was just to get the funding to either manufacture or license. I created a pitch deck, which, even though I was going to be contacting friends and family for an investment, I wanted to show them that I was very serious about this endeavor and that I had a plan. The problem was I couldn't decide whether to venture or license, which would affect on how I structured the investment. If the plan was to manufacture, a C note made the most sense to offer investors. But then what if I wanted to license? And this is something that I spoke with mentors and other people who had walked the path and just to get their 2 cents. And ultimately, because of the times we're living in, especially right now with supply chain issues, also my greenness in the industry, my learning curve, and also because being quick to market was so important, I decided to go the licensing route and I structured my investment as loans. But I think just whenever you hit a roadblock like that, just speaking with someone who has done what you're trying to do already is paramount.
And I want to again highlight for our listeners that you took this on in very much of a step by step fashion. First and foremost, you were looking at that fork in the road. Am I going to venture? Am I going to license? And I can tell you, I'll call it a mistake of my own that I made is I always knew I wanted to license. But after 3 years of feeling like I was not getting anywhere with my tour of wallet manufacturers, I said, fine, I'm just going to make some of these. And I don't think that was a mistake, but I think I stayed at it a little bit too long. So I was going down the venturing path for a fair number of years when that's really not what I wanted to do. And in the end, I think I lost a few years of time because I should have made that decision and stuck with it as you did. But you looked at the two different options and you said, look, if I'm going to use, and I also want to highlight that you looked at family and friends as a capital resource. And the reality is, for an invention, as risky as it is, it's not that you can't get investors involved, but you're asking them to take a pretty big bet on something that's unproven. And investors most typically like to be a piece of something that's already profit making or have got some sales going. But anyways, you looked at the two different options and said, look, if I'm going to I'm going to need to do a C note, et cetera. You did prepare a pitch deck, which is extremely considerate to show family and friends that, look, this is a serious business. It's just not something I've sketched out on paper. Kudos for you for taking such a professional approach, very much of a career oriented approach to your business and the results that you've gotten from that.
Thanks. Yeah. I was very serious about it and I just wanted that to be reflected.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, Tanya, what is next for you? What do you see as being your next 6 months or year as you move forward? What do you see as being the next steps as you go forward?
So currently, I am the manufacturer ready prototype is completed. My work with Brian is completed. And I am working on a licensing pitch deck. So this is going to be a little bit different than the pitch deck that I presented to my friends and family. And I'll just be knocking on doors and shopping around for a licensing agreement. That will be the next step. So hopefully within the next 3 to 6 months, I'll have some really good news.
That sounds great. We'll probably want to touch bases with you and see where that is at as well. So, as we roll towards a close, are there any parting words that you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, I'm thinking about like the beginning of this sort of journey, and I know I have plenty ahead of me. But I think that one thing that I found helpful is I started creating just like a work journal where each day, just a regular notebook journal, and then writing each day and writing what I completed that day or what I worked on that day. And I found it so motivating where sometimes I would think about, oh, I just haven't made as much progress as I'd like. And then I'll flip back a chunk of pages and I'll look where I was a few months ago. And it really gave me that motivation to keep going. Oh, I actually have done a lot. A lot of times with inventing, it can feel like you're going in a circle because you'll try something, it doesn't work. And then it feels like almost like you're trying from the beginning again. But even though you're beginning again, but with experience. And sometimes you forget that. So that work journal I found has been really helpful in just what inventing is. You have this idea for a prototype and just breaking it down into small chunks, small digestible chunks that like you don't have to complete the whole thing in one day. Just do one little part, focus on that piece, and then the next day focus on the next piece. And then before you know it, your idea is in your hands.
By the way, I'm a big fan of journals. I've been writing a personal journal for over 20 years and pretty much every day. And it's just my thoughts, what's going on. It's more than just my thoughts. I typically put my must do's for the day. That's a to-do list, which needless to say, not all of them get done, but I have it to look at and refer to every day. And I do things like my gratitudes for the day. It's always great to reflect on the things that you're grateful for. But just putting your thoughts onto paper and then being able to look back as you described and look back 6 months and say, oh my gosh, yeah, I've made a lot of progress. And then I also like that you talked about breaking things into chunks step by step. And I think a real bugaboo for so many inventors is they're always looking towards the goal completion that could be months or years later. And then they keep thinking, well, I'm so far from that. Instead of saying, wait a minute, what did I get done in the last month? Where was I a month ago? Where do I think I can be a month from now? Oh, I'm really making real progress. Sometimes there's things that slow you down, but putting it on paper helps you to clarify what's in your mind. So I'm a huge fan of journals.
Yeah, I think pen to paper is powerful.
I like that. Pen to paper is powerful. That there's a psychological connection for that because some people say, well, I'm just going to do it on my laptop, which is fine. But when you write, especially in cursive, it's a direct connection to your subconscious and it engages things at a little different level than almost any other way. Like a keyboard does not do the same thing. So that's something that is interesting, I think.
Yeah, they say that because when you're writing something down on paper, it forces you to really be careful with the words that you choose. And it forces you to really think about things with a little bit more weight. So I agree completely.
My final question is how can our listeners reach you if they have other questions?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn, Tanya Jackson. And then my company name is Curious Innovations.
All right. So Tanya Jackson, and that's Tanya, right?
Correct.
And Curious Innovations is your company,
That is my company name. Yep.
and they can find you easily there. Tanya, I want to thank you so much for sharing your ahas, your journeys, your ups and downs with us today on the podcast. Really appreciate that and would definitely like to take a look at catching up with you 6 months or a year from now and see where you are at that point in time. So again, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
It was my pleasure. Thanks, Alan.
You bet. Thanks so much for tuning in to Inventors Helping Inventors. If you like the show, please tell your friends about it. Make sure to subscribe in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts so you won't miss a single episode. Talk to you soon.